my career choices, I'm anything but typical. So it's no surprise that I would choose to do a career or a. Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order the regular board meeting for Monday, September 23rd, 2013. Everyone, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Brado?
Here.
Mr. Capral?
Here.
Mr. Swikowski?
Here.
Mr. Tominello?
Here.
Mr. York?
Here.
Mr. Witt? Here. Mr. Verkust?
Here. Thank you. Next is the approval of our consent agenda, including the approval of the regular board meeting minutes of September 9, 2013, approval of the bills in the amount of $947,833.50, approval of the August 2013 Revenue and Expenditures Report, and approval of an invoice to Environmental Incorporated in the amount of $1,250 for fuel tank monitoring. Be looking for a motion?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Support.
Got a motion by Mr. Tominello, a support by Mr. Swikowski. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next is the approval of the regular agenda. Board members, as we discussed in the board forum, at this time, we'd like to remove item D, which is the closed session to discuss the fire chief's performance review and contract. I'm not aware of any other changes. If there are any, or if none, there's a motion.
Make a motion to approve the amended agenda.
All right, we got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Capro.
Chairman, are we rescheduling this for next meeting?
It would be the intent. Yep, that's the plan right now. I've notified both parties of that. But because all parties could not be present, I felt it fair to remove it from the agenda. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Next on the agenda is announcements. The Harrison Township firefighters will be hosting the Pancake Breakfast and Open House this Sunday, September 29th, from 9 a.m. to noon at Fire Station 2. That's the newest station on Jefferson Avenue. Pancakes, sausage, juice, coffee, and milk will be served. The cost is $6 for adults, $3 for children ages 4 through 12. All proceeds will go to fund the Harrison Township Firefighters Charity Giving Tree Program. For more information, you can call 466-1450. The Harrison Township Beautification Commission will be hosting a fall perennial plant exchange. This exchange will take place next Saturday, a week from this Saturday, October 5th, 2013, at the Tucker Senior Center at 26980 Ballard, and that'll be from 9 a.m. until 11 a.m. Folks are encouraged to bring their healthy, bare root, slug-free labeled plants that you might want to exchange. Keep your plants in your automobile trunk for trading. And then bring yourself a box on recycled containers and bags to be able to exchange or to carry your new perennial plants. The Harrison Township Public Library will be hosting a seasonal container gardening presentation on Thursday, October 10th at 6:30 p.m. To register, call the library at 586-329-1261 or stop by the library at the circulation desk. The library will also be hosting Tales with Tales on Saturday, October 19th, from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Children will get the opportunity to read to Patty, a certified and insured therapy dog. Pre-registration is required. All children must be accompanied by an adult. Construction on the Metro Parkway Bridge eastbound over the spillway is in full swing and expected to be completed by the end of October. If you have any questions on any of these items, you can call the supervisor's office, 466-1445, or also visit the website at www.harrison-township.org. I believe we also had an event that was held by EDC and Parks and Rec. Mr. Caproll, do you have any report on that?
I do. The event was the first annual EDNC golf outing, which was held September 16th at Gowney Golf Course. Very nice, very nicely done. Special thanks to Bill Servio, Bernie Audie, and Shane Brown, and all the other members of the EDNC and all the other volunteers that helped out with the event. Quite a successful event. They raised money for the EDNC and also for Parks and Recreation, and we, as part of the Parks and Recreation, we owe them a great debt of gratitude, and we thank them for all their hard work, and we appreciate it. And hopefully, it's an event that will grow, and we'll have it every year. So again, thanks to all the members of the EDNC.
Yep. Well, thanks to everyone who was involved and everyone who came out. It was a nice day of golf and a nice meal and a good fundraiser for two worthy causes. Are there any other announcements?
You know, we had a couple people who have come in the office and called. Just a reminder, the last day for yard waste pickup is the last day in November. So, just a reminder.
Yard waste through the month of November.
Yeah,
Yard
we already
waste
have
pickup.
people asking, so.
Yep. All right, good.
Let's pick up in November.
All right, if there's no other announcements, we'll move forward on our agenda to item B1 from the clerk's office. Mr. Witt?
Yes, before the board tonight, I prepared a policy concerning the appointment of deputies for the full-time officials. Basically, what the policy is designed to bring the appointment of deputies to the same standards that the board has held for other employees, including a physical drug test, background check. Deputies exist in sort of a unique position, allowing the full-time official to appoint any individual that they'd like, but the Board of Trustees has that ability to set compensation and times they work and that kind of stuff. So this is a sort of a draft for the board to look at and make changes as they'd like. That sort of balances those interests while ensuring that the township hires qualified individuals and protects our fiduciary responsibility for the community. I know when I came on as a deputy, I went into the finance department and said, well, when do I have to take my physical or my drug test? And they go, you don't. And I said, really? And I thought that was odd, and with the change in position, it sort of reminded me about it, so.
So I know there's two issues here, and I don't know whether it's coincidental or by design, but the state has addressed this matter in two ways. All three full-timers have the ability to appoint a deputy. Some communities treat deputies in different ways. Of course, in our case, those deputy positions have been full-time positions. Only the clerk, the treasurer, and the supervisor have the authority to appoint their deputy. At the same time, however, the process of funding or basically hiring people and compensating people is a responsibility that falls on the board. So I suppose there might be two ways to look at this, and I know that we've had some discussion within the office prior to this evening's meeting. And one option is to draft some sort of a policy so that we sort of establish or put in writing a procedure that we might follow to almost kind of a confirmation procedure. That's one option or one way. But in the absence of this policy, it is this board's option or right to fund or not fund, or in essence to compensate or not compensate any employee. Obviously, we have employees that are in bargaining units, and that there are rules of how we have to conduct ourselves as an employer, but deputies are at-will employees, so the process of appointing and the process of hiring or compensating are really independent. Without this policy, it's our understanding and different legal opinions that we're aware of that the board still possesses the right. So some arguments might say, well, why have a policy? So there's two ways to look at it, and we thought it might be worth bringing to the board for some deliberation.
This is moving forward, not for the deputies we currently employ.
Right, I don't believe that that we're at a point where we believe we wanna go backward
Right.
and address this. But the question comes up, what if, when we appoint deputies, by law, a deputy acts in the absence of the full-timer and assumes some or a majority of those responsibilities? What if someone says, well, I'd like to appoint someone, and it turns out that for whatever reason, that person has something in their past that makes them maybe not as eligible for that position or to hold that responsibility? In the event that an issue or a problem were to occur, the question is it only that full-time official that appointed the person that bears the responsibility? Or do we as a board bear responsibility because we didn't go through a process to sort of confirm or investigate or, say, well, why didn't you do your due diligence? What kind of rules do you have in place for hiring a person who's gonna be responsible to fulfill these following responsibilities? So I think that's where the concern comes in, and that's why we might have discussion about a policy.
Alrighty, I'll throw my 2 cents in. First off, the state law does not allow, and Rob, help me, I have not read this in the state law, that it allows the Board of Trustees to set the times that deputies work.
Right, I would say that the function of the responsibilities in the office are the role of whoever has the authority to hire the person. A more difficult analysis, though, if you have a policy determining pay, and you have one competing board action that says no pay, and then a township treasurer that says, I want to pay my deputy, so, yeah, it would be an interesting,
The state law, I mean, reading this policy, I'll just cut to the chase. I have no problem with a deputy having to pass a physical, drug screen, and criminal check. I would certainly hope that if somebody gets elected, that you would entrust that person would go and speak with whoever, vet them, whatever you want to call it, to find out if there's anything in their background. And quite honestly, at the end of the day, say somebody turned up, whatever, to be a felon or something. I know if that were my person, they'd be out real quick because I'm not getting my name put on the front page of the paper. That's what happens. I don't know if it's more of a board thing or if it's just the political pressure that comes from that. But I think there's a mechanism for that. But what I worry about with this policy, the way it reads right now, is when you start, our policy currently has been in place for, I don't know how long, probably since Mr. Heath has been on the board. You come through maybe a very acrimonious election season, people get elected, people appoint deputies. The board has already established the compensation for the elected officials and their deputies. And for the deputies, it's 20% under what the elected official makes. That's already been established. So really all it is that person. Now, while I would like to think that we do this in an altruistic manner, the simple fact is that if you come out of an election with a majority, and you're doing the confirmation, and maybe they're innocent deputies, maybe they're not, I don't know, maybe they're a campaign manager, maybe they're a friend, I don't know. But the simple fact is that if a majority wants to make political hay, or they're angry about a piece of brochure or whatever, they can bring that deputy up there and interview them, and how many times can you go through that before you end up having nobody that wants to even be the deputy? I can see that occurring here, and when I was talking to Adam, that would have occurred in 2004 with some of those board members. I know that if they had a policy that you had to come to me and you had to confirm through me, that some of those board members had a deep hatred for some of the other full-time officials. And I think we would have spent several nights, going through this, and I don't think it would serve the deputy very well, and I don't think it would serve the board very well to get in that process where the board is basically, you know, pushing a full-time whatever, deputy clerk treasurer to hire the person that they want. I can see that happening with this. You know, you'd hope that it wouldn't happen, but once you start saying confirmation by the board, while we might all understand somewhat what that means, somebody new or, you know, they might not. And I can see a whole bunch of hours spent trying to get a deputy confirmed.
Fair enough. So a couple thoughts. I think you brought up some very valid points. At a bare minimum, I don't know that there's anyone here that wouldn't want some sort of a screening of an employee. In other words, if we were to sort of codify or establish a policy that said deputies have to go through a certain process. So would it be fair to say a pre-employment physical, a drug screen, criminal background check, and a resume? I mean, would those be four things that we'd say we would want of every, I mean, in other words, at least on those things, we would agree, true?
I would agree with that.
Right?
As long as it says in there that, you know, they're required to pass those things.
Sure,
Yeah.
right,
Because, I mean, somebody could still say, yeah, well, he did it, he failed,
right.
but I'm hiring him anyway.
Well, and
Well,
that was,
then the question becomes, right? Say somebody, you know, 40 years ago, you know, as a teenager, you know, did something stupid. It happens to people, you know, and they're, I don't know, maybe they had a drug charge or something, and now they're, you know, a good member of society. They did their time, and you know, I think we all know people like that.
sure.
That do something stupid in their youth. Would that preclude them from holding that position?
Well, how do you pass a criminal background check? I suppose we,
I don't
you
know.
know, yeah, I don't know
mean,
that you.
I think,
I've always come
I think
back
it's
clean,
tough to put
so-
that language in there past.
Well, on the
Right.
criminal background check, yeah, but the drug
Right.
test and a physical would,
So you might say that you have to pass a pre-employment physical and drug screen and submit to a criminal background check as well as submit a resume, right? So I mean, I think we could probably work on that wording. So
Yeah, like
if we
if-
take incremental steps, at least in concept of drafting that, and you could probably help us a little bit, we could probably all say that we collectively agree on those things as a bare minimum.
Yes.
And at that point,
I would.
I think that we would say that at least at that point, if we're recognizing, and Mr. Huth, just and I know maybe a little bit of clarification. So I know there may be some issues with, you know, is it, you know, times they work, whatnot. But a board of trustees would have the right to establish compensation for any employee.
Correct,
True?
true,
Policy or no policy, we have that.
correct.
So at a bare minimum, if we were to say, we have a policy that says before any deputy is, or in order to be hired, or what, language, I think we'd have to work that out. But they must submit a resume, they must submit to a criminal background check, and they must pass a pre-employment physical and drug screen. But, you know, at that point, the board is notified of those results. Maybe we'd say something in there, the board of trustees made aware of those things, right? Because we're ultimately that person.
Yes.
Now, at that time, the board, any board member has the right to bring forward a motion to say, well, I don't want to pay that person, right? And the board can vote on that. But to say that every deputy has to go through a confirmation could be that sticking point. You'd mentioned it would be nice to look at this in an altruistic manner. I might throw that same thing around though, saying, because the statement you made was, well, I'm gonna vet that fella out, and I'm not gonna appoint a guy who's a knucklehead. Well, that's altruistic in itself. We're assuming that each one of us is always gonna do the right thing.
Well, I mean-
Could be unintentionally, is the point.
Well, I guess my point is that, you know, I respect the process.
Sure.
And I respect the fact that, you know, you do a deputy and Adam does a deputy, and whether or not I like that person or get along with them or whatever,
Mhm.
you know, it's really not the issue. That's your job and your deputy, and
Right.
I just don't wanna see, you know, like I said, especially after an election, it can get quite,
Sure.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, there's, right now, I mean, it's sort of a free-for-all, and we're depending on the kindness and good nature of the person that gets elected. But, you know, down the road, there could be that person that comes in and goes, yeah, I don't care, I'm hiring my campaign manager. He wrote 20 bad checks. I mean, we have people in the state legislature that have been arrested for bad checks, so it's not unlikely that they could be, you know, your campaign manager or somebody's campaign manager, and they go, yeah, I'm gonna bring him on board as my deputy. Well, guess what? As a board member, I don't want him anywhere near the township's checkbook.
Right.
And as a deputy, they have that authority.
Right.
but I
So,
think we
but
can
by
all
doing
agree,
this, yeah.
but I think we can all agree, if that were to occur, I could tell you in my office, they'd be gone real quick.
True, but
because-
that's how
I'm
it
not
is.
talking- I'm not
Just
talking
be-
to you.
It wouldn't even get to the board because
Right.
I wouldn't wanna deal with the political fallout.
Understood. But we're not drafting a policy that satisfies
I
you know,
agree.
the three personalities that might be here. We're looking at a policy. So whether this says that the board is gonna confirm them or not, it doesn't inherently put in place any responsibility that we don't have. But the scenario that I described after Mr. Witt presented this was in the event that we have someone who turns out to be less than reliable, and an investigation on the part of someone says, well, didn't you know that this guy was a felon, or he was, had charges, or was convicted of X, Y, and Z? As a board member, if my answer was no, I'd be uncomfortable with that. So if we had a policy that was in place that we might revise that says, well, they're gonna be subjected to the four things as we discussed, the board will be notified of those results. I mean, I don't even know that you have to say that they have to pass a physical. I mean, that's, I guess, up to the board, I suppose, right? You might say, well, I accept that. This person, you know, may have a, you know, his job responsibility or her job responsibility may not need to pass that. But at a bare minimum, to say they went through these four tests, or these three tests and a resume, they've produced a resume, and the board is made aware of those details. It's universal to every deputy, and the person says, I want to bring on James Smith, the board at that point certainly can say, number one, they've been notified. So number two, somewhere down the road, if it turns out James Smith is a felon, you'd say, well, why didn't you do something? You knew about it, then I guess then I could say it fell on me, and I chose not to act at the time when I could have brought forward to the board that I don't want to fund for this position. So, is there an interest in a policy that might be something like that?
Well, it's, again, I think the only thing you're looking at is holding them to the same standard as an employee.
Correct.
But ironically, all seven of us never had to go through anything.
Correct.
And in the future, you could have 7 former drug addicts sitting up here passing
Absolutely.
judgment on somebody else. I mean, it's just,
Right.
it's ironic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, and as far, you know, I don't see, I understand what Mr. York is saying about the political ones. You would hope that would never, you know, come into play, but, you know, all things are probable.
Right.
I
You
can
know,
t-
A
but-
policy won't prevent it or guarantee it. It
Right.
could happen.
I think we have a responsibility to make sure even entry-level employees have to go through these four items most of the time.
Everybody does, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we have a responsibility. That's a pretty important
Never
position.
inhaled.
Any deputy position's an important
Never
position.
inhaled.
So
That's right.
we not only have a responsibility to make sure that these four items are checked off the list, but we need to make sure that they're qualified. We have to have qualified people as our assistants.
Sure, with this pretty significant responsibilities.
Yeah.
Mr. Witt,
So-
I know that
but-
you, oh, I'm sorry. I know you brought this. Do you see some value in maybe, I mean, would you be willing to work with the attorney to,
Yeah. And we can,
Yeah, if I could get another, I hear what you're saying, like maybe submit a draft to Adam
okay?
and see, take another shot at it.
Well, we
It's
could
nice
bring
to
it
have the, it's nice to have policy without allowing any board member to really exploit
Right.
that, I guess is my.
Right.
Yep.
And I think inherently, if something like that were to happen, I think that the board would just probably take matters into their own hands at that point, I would think, and, because the law does allow them, whether you write it or not.
Right.
you know.
Yep.
So would we be looking for a motion to table at this point?
Is action required?
Further research or something.
No action is required.
Right, I mean, our next item on the agenda is public comments, so anybody who wishes to speak to it, we're not silencing them, we'll give them an
Okay.
opportunity to address the board, but
Fine.
I think we could probably look at talking about this in the future in a way that everybody might be more agreeable. Fair enough?
Yep. Just so everybody knows,
Yep.
resume, I know that I believe the law, because when I was elected, we had to fill out an application for employment. I don't know if you wanna consider that the resume or not. But you have,
That's an internal, I think your resume is,
Yeah, I think if you're gonna rise to that level and carry that responsibility, I think it's a reasonable.
anybody who's been in the workforce or has a background has a
That's fine.
resume,
Yeah.
right?
Yep, I had one when I was in high school.
Yeah, they're
Didn't have a
different-
lot on it,
They're
but,
different information.
right,
I haven't had to do one in a few years, but
sure. All right,
I'm sure I could refresh it.
well, if we've discussed that at length, then we'd be ready for item C on the agenda, which is public comments. We'll open up the floor for public comment.
Bill Servia, resident. I was going to point out with what Mr. Switowski pointed out, that none of you had to go through that.
Correct.
But I have a couple other points. First off, the policy, the way you're describing it, would require you to vet these deputies each and every time you're reelected, because you're reappointing those deputies each and every time for another term. They don't carry over. And the third thing is, I don't believe it's legal to have someone work and not pay them at least minimum wage. I think our attorney could address that. But if you have a full-time employee, you may be able to lower their salary, but I don't think you can cut it to zero. That's against the law. Thank you.
Evening Board, Matt Zarnecki, Secretary, Harris Township Firefighters Association. We understand that you tabled the agenda item regarding Chief Lopez. President Andy Hood's out of town tonight, but he's prepared a statement on behalf of our membership that they would still like to be read at the meeting. This is from President of our local, Andy Hood. Board of Trustees, I apologize for not being able to attend tonight's board meeting. I wanted to offer a few comments related to tonight's subject and make clear the issues related to the letter you are discussing tonight. The Executive Board had put off as long as possible the vote of no confidence in Chief Lopez. Throughout numerous meetings with Supervisor Verkest, the Executive Board of Local 1737 has kept him aware of the situation and our members' dissatisfaction with the performance of Chief Lopez. That culminated with our membership voting as they did in June. In their vote, they directed the Executive Board to draft the letter and outlined the reasons for us to do so. All the members signed the letter of their own free will. There was no coercion or strong-arming anyone into signing it. That letter represents the feelings of the members of the Harrison Township Fire Department. This is not a personal attack on Chief Lopez. We understand it is not easy to manage a fire department, but feel as though he has not been able to address the needs of the fire department has. The rest of the Executive Board is present tonight to discuss, at the Board's pleasure, any or all the issues related to the letter and any other questions the Board may have tonight. Respectfully, Andy Hood, President, Harrison Township Firefighters, Local 1737. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Interesting point relative to minimum wage, and I think it's important that we understand that the appointment of someone doesn't necessarily mean that we assign to them 40 hours worth of work. As an example, we have folks who are appointed to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and as such, we agree to give them I believe it's a $50 stipend per meeting. We have folks who are appointed to other boards and commissions that aren't compensated in any way. So appointment and employment, I think, are two separate terms. I know there are communities that appoint deputies, but those deputies do not serve in a full-time position. So, not saying that it would be a clean process, and it certainly wouldn't be something that I think a board should use in a very casual or free manner, but the board does ultimately have the responsibility to employ people and compensate them. Now, if one board member chose to require someone to perform 40 hours worth of work and the Board of Trustees wasn't willing to pay for 40 hours worth of labor at minimum wage, yeah, we could probably have a problem there. But I don't know that the board could be somehow coerced to spend money if they choose not to authorize it. Hopefully, we can come up with a policy that satisfies everybody and we won't have to ask Mr. Huth how to solve that problem if it happens.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
a little disappointed that the fireman got up and said that publicly tonight. Was the intent tonight in this closed session, you said two parties, was the intent to have the executive board, the chief and us all in the room together, or was the intent to have just the chief and us in the room?
Actually, I had not planned on either party being present.
Okay.
I received a letter. The letter didn't require any particular action, but I'd offered to the firefighters that we would address it. Just this afternoon, I found out that the firefighters made the request to address the board in closed session. And so at that time, I said I only thought it would be fair that both parties should be able to be present at the same time, even if they're not in the room physically at the same time. And I found that the chief was not available for tonight's meeting. So I spent considerable amount of time on the phone from about 2 o'clock on to talk to the attorney, find out we knew that everything was right, and it's our intent to have this closed session on our next agenda, which is about 22 days away, just as the calendar falls, and to make sure that both parties are there. I spoke with both parties, and both parties expressed to me over the phone that they would make themselves available. And I think in an orderly, fair format, we allow each party to address the board, answer any questions, make any concerns or comments that they'd like to have. Nobody's delivering the message except the parties involved, and then the board can go enter into closed session and discuss the matter as they see fit.
Are we gonna have that discussion in closed session?
That was the understanding. That's what we asked. Yep.
Okay, because I was gonna say, I haven't talked to the executive board, and, you know, I was gonna say maybe you, Adam, and I should get together with them prior to that meeting and see what these issues are, because there's some serious issues here, and I'd like to know a little bit more than just the generalities.
Yep. Well, it was my intent to, again, to address that after hearing that the executive board wanted to address the board, that we would let them address the whole board. But certainly,
I
any
don't
board
wanna get
member
into
at
too
any
much of
time.
it,
Yeah, any board member at any time can, follow up, ask questions, talk to whoever.
Well, no, I
they
don't
might
think that each of us, you go talk to the executive board, and then I call them and I go talk to them.
Correct. Right.
That doesn't serve anybody.
That's why I thought, once
you
they
know.
said that they'd like to address the board, I felt that was a fair request. We're not required to do that, but I think it's a reasonable request. I'd only said that I thought might be balanced to allow the chief the same opportunity, because he may have some concerns or comments or perspective on the matter.
I'm all for everybody hearing whatever's going on.
Correct. So I thought that would be the most
And
orderly way.
That's great, I'm all for it.
Right. And it's for that reason that I requested that the item be removed, so that it could be brought back in 3 weeks. Mr. Hoot said I didn't have to say it had to be brought back, just remove it, but I had told all parties that we would talk
Perfect.
about it in 3 weeks. So,
That'll work.
all right. Are there any other comments? If not, then I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there support?
Support.
All right, we got a motion with support to adjourn at about 7:35 or so. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, board.
I agree with you, but one of the things too is